Our goal at Ridgewood Talks has long been to celebrate the leaders and legends of the village. And now we feature the best of Ridgewood business leaders. Ridgewood Talks and Ridgewood Living Magazine present the Business Spotlight, hosted by Jeannie Johnson.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Johnson, and welcome to Ridgewood Talks. Today, we are joined by someone who is doing truly meaningful work in our community, and that is Michael Tozzoli. He is the CEO of West Bergen Mental Health Care. And if you've ever wondered where to turn when life feels overwhelming or how we as a community can better support mental wellness, this conversation is for you. So let's dive in. Hi, Michael, and thanks for being here. I'm so glad you're here. This is I think the fourth time that you've been on our show.
It really is, and this is the first time that we're actually seeing each other in person. I love it.
I do too. I love it. So for people who have not heard about or know anything about West Bergen, can you just give us the elevator pitch?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So West Bergen Mental Health Care has been around in the village for quite a while, 1963. Nice little group sat around a dining room table, names you might recognize like Mr. Sealfons from Sealfons Department Store, Dr. Rokema, who was Marge Rokema's husband. A number of folks in the community decided that West Ridgewood in general needed a mental health center. So we started over at Dry Cleaners over on Godwin with a handful of staff and a handful of people. And today we're north of 200 staff and we'll touch north of 3,000 lives. So we are the quietly growing mental health center in the village that takes really good care of the village, and the village takes good care of us as well.
I am absolutely stunned by what you just told me. In 1963, a group of really caring people recognized that we needed to address mental health care, and yet, there's still a stigma attached to it. I can't. We're going to get into that, the stigma-free thing, sure. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month. But I want to talk first about Ridgewood Living Magazine. So you do the spotlight there. Tell us more about that and what you do for Ridgewood Living Magazine.
Absolutely. We do it every month. And we decided strategically not to make it an ad about West Bergen. Mm-hmm. We really decided that part of our goal, part of our mission at West Bergen is to get information out there, a little bit like we're doing now, right, having this conversation. And so in the printed version, every single month, we do something where we ask ourselves, what is going to help the community? What are people struggling with now, and how can we be helpful? Right. And so we do it every month, and we change the topic every month, and it's a very good relationship for us.
Good. Yeah. Well, it's a great magazine. We love it. And we love partnering with them and highlighting people like you. So thank you again for being here. I was really hoping that we could get Barbara Hand to come with us today, or to be on the show with us today, because she has a very pivotal role there. First of all, she's a firecracker, and I love her to death. So why don't you tell our listeners what role Barbara has there, and also how, if people are interested in helping out, how they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Barbara Hand does lead up our team in development, and we really conceptualize folks helping West Bergen in three ways: time, talent, and treasure, right? So time is, we have a big crew that comes in and volunteers at West Bergen, whether they're making lunches for our clients that come to the day program, or wrapping gifts or getting gifts during the holidays. Certainly time, big time. People come in, they have their various things that they do. Talent, whether it's a legal world, a public relations world, engineering, we have a whole cadre of people, whether they're volunteering or sitting on the board of trustees, they really care about the place and they really care about our clients.
Well, my co-host, Jordan Kaufman, is on the board there.
He very much is, a very active.
And they're very active. Your board members are very active too, which is great.
Very, very.
Yeah, and I know that you do like things like bingo. People can come and be bingo callers. You do all sorts of things there. So, I mean, I really encourage our listeners, if you want to do some good, if you want to contribute to West Bergen Mental Health, please do so. We'll give you all the information at the end of the show, but show up, help out. I mean, because it's actually really, really fun. And then that also helps to remove the stigma too, because you see what goes on there and you understand more about some of the issues of mental health, right?
It really is. There's a big difference when you walk through the front door. Something happens. You see it, you feel it. Not only that, for our clients that struggle with chronic mental illness and live in our group homes or day programs, people coming in and volunteering sends them a really clear message. They're grateful beyond words. You will get a packet of thank you drawings and cards that will make your head spin, actually.
And I also feel like it's really important when we see people that are struggling with mental health issues and we see them on the street, if we participate in their life, we have a better understanding, and it's not as intimidating or maybe even as scary if we get to know what some of these issues are, right?
Oh, without question. I think that the field, actually, in West Bergen in particular, but the field has come a long way. I think we used to think of ourselves as therapists, and we certainly are, and you come to the room and you do your work and then you leave the office. We've really generalize that philosophy. We believe that we're all part of the solution here, each and every one of us. We're going to do our job as therapists. The community is going to do their job with time, talent, treasury, volunteering. The religious community. Exactly.
That's huge.
Sending that message. The louder we can make that message, and I pick that word carefully, the louder we can make that message, the more likely people are actually going to reach out for help when they need to.
Right. So that takes us right into, I know we're at the end of May, but it takes us into May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So how did that start? And then I also want to touch on Stigma Free. So can you wrap those two things up together and tell us more about each?
Very much. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. West Bergen, we do a series of events, all kinds of events, both internal and external. So we do all kinds of public speaking, all kinds of talks that we're doing in the community.
Like being on a podcast.
Here we are. We like to say about talking about mental health, anyone that will invite us anywhere, anytime, we will be there. Because the more conversations we can have. And Mental Health Awareness Month just gives us that ability to put a bright light on it, that spotlight that really helps us and you and the community really step up and be part of it. We also hope that it gets people to pause and think about their own lives and maybe think about themselves or their nephew or their niece or their uncle and think, maybe I can have a conversation with that person and say, hey, I listened to this podcast. Blame it on us, I always say after a talk. Totally blame it on us.
Yeah.
I listened to this podcast. I went to this talk and I was thinking, I'm a little concerned about you.
Right.
Would you ever be interested, or can I convince you to come in and maybe talk to someone?
Oh, I think it's so important. Again, and not being afraid to have those conversations. Are you okay? I want to talk about this too. I learned something that I thought was so fascinating because we put the emphasis on mental health care, but truly it is health care.
Very much so.
Expound on that.
Very much so. In fact, we just had this conversation. West Bergen used to be called the West Bergen Mental Health Center, and it was changed a number of years ago.
I know, we just talked about that. Yeah.
Right? We believe that mental health is really the broader public health model. It is a public health issue. It's not a social service issue. Believe it or not, it's not. It is a public health issue. I always say to any politician that I see, and I see a lot of them in various meetings, I always say to them, my key line with them always is, remember that mental health is your largest public health issue in your district, period. It's the largest public health issue in our town. It's the largest public health issue in our area.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. And I have all sorts of statistics. One of the things that was so shocking to me is that, well, first of all, there's been a rise in ADHD and ADD diagnoses. Okay, so that's all kind of under this umbrella of mental health care or mental wellness. I like that word better.
Yes.
So mental wellness, having people recognize that they might be struggling with something that is actually diagnosable is huge. But then I also wonder, and I really want you to, help us unravel some of this. I spoke to my therapist. Very proud to say that I have a terrific therapist. Her name is Alicia Bernaducci. She is fantastic. And we talked yesterday about why some of these diagnoses are so prevalent right now. And she would like to know, how much does technology have to do with that? And how much does all of the social media have to do with all of this? Like, help us figure out what we should be doing, especially if we have younger kids. How should we monitor their social media use and their use on their devices?
great question. It really is. First of all, thumbs up to calling out that you have a therapist and naming her and
I love
talking
her.
about that relationship.
Yeah.
I love it because we role model, right?
Right.
Someone is going to watch this podcast and go, Jeannie goes, maybe I ...
Yeah.
So thumbs up, loud and clear on that one. ADHD in particular remains the number one childhood diagnosis that is diagnosed, period. There are others. Autism is significant.
Is it
Depression,
autism
anxiety.
or is it on autism spectrum disorder?
Correct. What we used to call Asperger's syndrome now is autistic spectrum disorder. And now we give them levels, level 1, 2, and 3. So as clinicians, we're kind of scoring people on a scale.
Right.
I think that's been helpful ultimately. There's some folks that think that's controversial, and I certainly get that. Whole nother.
Hold on, like that is something that I want to talk about too.
Sure.
Because just today, my 40-year-old cousin was diagnosed. Well, I guess she got her diagnosis yesterday, but she was just diagnosed with being on the spectrum. She's 40 years old, and she's completely shocked and unraveled by it. So, tell me what the controversy is about the Asperger's autism thing. I'm curious.
Your experience is not atypical. Particularly for folks that are over the age of 35 to 40, we were not as good in diagnosis when we were in school. So think about what school was like 35 years ago. Right? So you have this little 5-year-old and they're in kindergarten and they're socially not quite connecting. But here's what's confusing about what we then called Asperger's, now call autism level 1. Typically their intelligence is normal. In fact, it's slightly above normal typically on average. It's the social milieu, it's the social implications of conversation, play, relationships don't come naturally to them. It's hard in the US as well with that population because our language is extremely inferential. It's way more inferential than you think. So, for example, toward the end of this podcast, you're going to politely say to me, Michael, this has been so nice. Now, what I'm hearing you say is you want to wrap this conversation up, right? You're trying to wrap.
Okay, you've done these a few times. Got it.
What folks on the spectrum only hear is that this has been very nice. They read it almost like a transcript. So they're not picking up that social cue that, okay, Jeannie's trying to wrap this conversation up. I'm then going to respond in kind by thanking you for the conversation.
Right.
We do this when we go to dinner with friends. We do this, our language is extremely inferential. And so here's the good news. Good news is we can actually teach social skills. We really can. And at West Bergen, we have a huge program, runs from preschool all the way through adults, including 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds and 55-year-olds, yes. And we work on these social skills. We work on learning the ability to infer language, the ability to look at body language, the ability that are not words, where we extrapolate behavior. So big changes both in the diagnostic, much improvement in the treatment arena as well. And I'm excited and happy about that.
I am
proud of our
too.
history there.
Oh gosh. Well, and I think that there's probably a lot of people that struggle with that more than what we probably think. And I'm not going to throw anybody in my household under the bus, but I am going to tell you a very funny story. One day I was doing laundry and I told someone in my household, do me a favor, can you go ahead and just get the clothes out of the washer and put them in the dryer, please? I'm really busy. I need some help with the laundry. So a couple hours later, I went down to the dryer and I went to take the clothes out and they were soaking wet. So I said to the person, I told you to put the clothes in the dryer. And they said, yeah, but you didn't tell me to turn the dryer on.
You missed a step.
Yeah. And that was a full-grown adult that did not infer, okay?
Didn't pick up, right? So we tend to be a little concrete.
Yeah.
And so therefore instructions need to be quite concrete.
Yes. So instead of, of course I got frustrated, but then I realized, oh, well, I guess that's on me. I should have, really spelled it out and told them exactly what I needed.
It's really interesting because families tend to pivot around that. And so why some folks can be 40, 45, 50 years old and just get the diagnosis now is because families tend to build themselves around the system.
Right.
So as folks have both strengths and weaknesses, and this is true for anything, as kids have strengths and weaknesses, as partners have strengths and weaknesses, we tend to pivot and build the family system around it
that.
to support that person. Yeah. And so they tend to keep going. And so sometimes the diagnosis comes later.
Oh my gosh. So I want to go into that now because one of the things that I want to talk to you about is sort of what is kind of being deemed as an epidemic of young men that have what we're calling failure to thrive syndrome. And I wonder if the connection there is that we have compensated so much in our household for those things, like you said, we figure out how they work, so we run our household. And then they go to college and the guardrails are down and they've got to figure out how to structure their lives themselves. And they just can't do it. I really want to go deeply into that. And just specifically, I want to focus on men because I know that 1 in 5 women are diagnosed with depression, anxiety, or some sort of thing, right?
Absolutely.
According to the CDC. And my question is always, well, why are women, why is that statistic out there so prevalently? Is that even a word, prevalently? I think it is.
It should be.
But why is that out there? And we're not talking about men. Like this is a real problem. We're now seeing that this is a severe problem. So what can we do as parents? What can we do as, family members when we see this happening either to our adult men or our young adult men that have this failure to thrive?
Great topic and a big one.
Yeah,
one that we
it's
see
a
a
lot.
lot of.
Okay.
And I think we see it in multiple levels. We do see it a little bit when they get to college. So there's this inability to kind of pull the academics together, the projects together. When that happens, I often wonder what kind of supports or what kind of help or what kind of maybe a little too much help was happening while they were home, right? And so who was kind of looking over the shoulder, who navigated the system there in terms of getting the work done? And then you're right, they sort of pick up, they go 3 hours north, they're in New England, they're in a dorm room and they're solo and they're kind of surfing along there.
And then, by the way, then a lot of college kids start dabbling in alcohol and, and then that
Absolutely.
just makes the spiral go down.
Sure. There's this convergence of multiple things, right? And so it's this, I'm out for the first time, right? I'm on my own for the first time. So there's more alcohol use and other things. There's all kinds of other things that go on. The second level that I see a lot of is failure to thrive post-college. So sometimes we see this kind of group of guys that do well in college. They join the fraternity. They play sports.
They got the band of brothers.
They do, right? And they know how to do that. And they spend a lot of time with these guys and with others. Then they come home, right? We do graduation and we do all kinds of pomp and circumstance. And then we pack up and we come home and we have to rebuild our lives. And that's really hard for many of them. And the reason it can be hard for many of them also is social.
Well, there you go with those social.
Fraternities, other things force you to be in close proximity to other human beings. Time actually builds relationships. There was a recent study out of Journal of Social Psychology that said to build a mild friend, right, a low-level friend, you need somewhere between 50 and 90 hours of face-to-face time. Think about that. A dorm does that.
Yeah.
Fraternities do that. Classrooms do that. You come home, and we don't really do that, right? Because we're getting jobs and we're doing this, and maybe we're going
And now they're working remotely.
Correct. So right, we're going to overlay the working remote. We're going to overlay this kind of social disconnect. And they haven't learned the skills in order to how to build relationships out there in the world. It can be really difficult for guys. Hard for them to reach out, hard for them to even reach out for help. I want to touch on your point in terms of female versus male, in terms of the diagnosis. In my opinion, Michael, maybe not the CEO of West Bergen, men underreport.
Oh yeah.
Without question, they
Oh,
underreport. There is just as much depression. There's high levels of anxiety, very high levels of anxiety, right? Number one, very, very high diagnosis. Second, as adults, we're seeing anxiety as the number one diagnosis these days. No coincidence, right? There's no guess there in terms of why that's happening. Guys underreport, one, and guys wait too long to come in for treatment.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so they'll come in, and they've lost their first job, and the third girlfriend has broken up with them, and their parents are having difficulty with the relationships. We're fighting at the kitchen table, and we have this kind of feeling of a fire burning as opposed to kind of a smoldering smoke. And so then you're doing a different type of treatment, right? It's fire department, put a fire out treatment as opposed to strategic, thoughtful.
Prevention.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, so
Big
I heard a statistic, and it's something like, well, when there is an emergency, when there is, we call 911 immediately.
Yeah.
But with men, it takes them on average 11 years. Is that right? 11 years to finally reach out. And by then, they're so demoralized that it just takes so long for them to come back up. And so I want to go into that, but I want to go back to why I think women are lucky. Because, I mean, if you look back into the history books, any of our issues, we were all like, think about how the doctors just said, oh, you know, like when our hormones do a lot, women's hormones work extra hard, right? Because we have babies. And so back in the olden days, doctors didn't know how to diagnose it, and so they just kind of just labeled us as crazy, right? So we've just been known that we're crazy. But also, I think because we're women and because we have so many issues around childbearing and things like that, we visit the doctor, our general practitioner, more often.
Agreed.
And so that's why we're diagnosed more frequently than men, because like I said, it takes men forever. I mean, it takes men forever to even kind of get it around to the idea that they should go in for an annual screening for everything, right?
And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean,
Tell me.
think about, picture yourself, you're now at the Daily Treat, okay? And there's a table of women sitting there, okay? Say 3 or 4, and they're having lunch together. And then there's a table of men, same age, sitting together. The ladies are typically going to be talk about what's going on in their lives, their kids, both the strengths and the weaknesses and the frustrations and the celebrations, how they're feeling about it. Guys have a much harder
How about
time.
those Knicks?
Correct. I can't tell you how many times someone will come in, a guy, and they'll come in for treatment, and I'll be assessing social support. So do you have friends? Absolutely, a lot of friends. I play cards. I go to the gym. So what do you talk about? And so you're right. They'll talk about sports. They'll talk about how they're working out. And what I typically do is we're going through a session, and guys will come in and put their cards on the table. It's hard for them, but they'll do it. And I'll inevitably pause, and I'll say, so you've been talking for the last half hour. Is there anyone else in the world that knows everything you've just talked about? So they're sitting over here, say your friend, your closest friend in the world is in this imaginary chair over here. Is your friend surprised, not surprised? Typically the answer is really surprised. So guys have a hard time being vulnerable, hard time talking about what's really going on for them. And there's all kinds of socialization reasons. You're right, in terms of medical, I think there's differences in how we treat gender way back. It starts way back, kindergarten, first, second, third grade. We treat gender very differently. And we're sending that message. We send the message, female, you're able to talk about your feelings. It's okay to be a little emotional. It's okay to talk about that. Guys, stiffen up.
Yeah.
Work a little harder.
Yeah, it's interesting because right now, this is a shameless plug for the Schoolhouse Museum here in Ridgewood. They have an exhibit called 200 Years of Childhood in America. And one of the things that I learned was back in the 18th century, men were very demonstrative. They were very physical and hugging each other, and they didn't have any talking about the issues that were in their lives, right? It was commonplace.
Yes, we've changed.
It was
Industrial Revolution changed
Correct.
that. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Big
so
difference.
actually, Teddy Roosevelt's my favorite president because he did all of the national parks.
Yeah.
But according to the research, they are putting a lot of that on him, saying, toughen up. Be a man, and then it's that whole John Wayne cowboy, big tough guy thing, which is, this whole thing is a social construct.
A question.
Like, we have told our men that you have to be this big burly, I can take anything, don't be weak kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And that is the worst thing that we could teach anyone, right?
Not only that, it frustrates our partners. Right, so it frustrates and it provides disconnection, right?
With our kids, with everyone, like as you said, even with their peers, right?
Sure. I was recently in a school that had a crisis, pretty significant crisis.
I'm so sorry about that.
So, it was a school that had a traumatic death of a teacher and a coach. Really intense, tough for the school, tough for the faculty, tough for the students. And I'm proud of the West Bergen team. 4 of us went in there, and we spent days, day after day after day, really supporting them and cheering them on and doing grief counseling and then stepping forward and stepping back. Here's the moment that stood out to me. We have an early morning faculty meeting to tell the staff that their colleague had passed away. Now, with social media, they were aware of it, right? They were certainly well aware of it, but we wanted to get them together, which is kind of part of the typical traumatic debrief process. We have a fairly structured process. Leader in the school, might be the principal, gets up, right? Starts to talk about the situation and breaks up. And I thought to myself,
Thank you.
God,
Thank
you
you.
have just role modeled
You're human.
exactly where we're going with this. Exactly what we're reaching for, hoping for, wanting. I said to him after, I couldn't have paid you to do that more effectively. Show those feelings, show those emotions. How do you want your boys to live? Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's authentic, you know?
Very much.
Yeah, that, by the way, let me just pause there. That was a big deal, what you went through. And I know, because, well, like I said, we've talked on this show so many times, and then in our personal life too. So I know that you show up. West Bergen Mental Health Care shows up in times of crisis. And I really applaud you for that. You and your team, you do such a phenomenal job with that. So
We
thank you.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you
Oh,
so much.
absolutely. So, you know, getting back to that too, with being authentic with your emotions and things like that, we talked, there's such a high rate of suicide in men in particular, right?
Yes.
And while I lament the fact that our younger generation is behind their screens at home on Zoom and not interacting and creating community, I also praise the Zoom revolution of COVID, because tell us what the impact was at West Bergen with that.
Absolutely. So I appreciate you bringing forward the guys, in particular men. So from a suicidology, it's a whole field of study. Suicidology point of view, the fastest growing segment of completed death by suicide are men ages 40 to 59. So if that statistic doesn't get us to pause and say, what can we do differently? How can we lean in and kind of rethink this process? I'm not sure what will. But that for me is a driver, right? Personally, professionally, just as a human being, that is very, very much a driver. At West Bergen, COVID happened, and we all went home, right? And not in the group home side, because those folks had to work 24/7, and amen to them. Wow, impressive. The therapists went home, and we did it via teletherapy for the first time. Prior to COVID, we did not do any teletherapy at West Bergen Mental Health Care. Not a little, not some, none. So in 3 or 4 days, we completely turned the system over, and we did teletherapy. Now we're going along, and the numbers are going up, right? More people are coming in. Demand is much higher, understandably so. And as a system, we're building systems around that to react. One of the things we do at West Bergen is we watch who's coming in demographically, because I think it's really interesting to see who's coming in, what are we doing, who's not coming in, and what can we do to break those walls down, like a conversation here, right now, right here, right? All of a sudden, we start to see that guys are coming in, men, age 25, 27, 31, 35, in numbers that we had never seen before.
Now, when you say coming in, are you saying that not physically?
No,
That's the key.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification there. I think of it as because it is active in real treatment,
sure it
so I
is.
think of it that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah.
But no, they're not coming in; they're logging on, and that's really the factor here. Because we then sit as a team and try to figure out what is going on here. Why is this demographic? It surprised us. It really did. It's not something we expected. It's not something we planned for. It's not something that we laid out programs for.
It was
just
a
happened.
very happy surprise,
An
for
authentic,
sure.
right? An authentic
Oh,
reaction
gosh,
to what's
yes.
going on. Now remember, teletherapy. We're not driving to West Bergen Mental Health Care. We're not pulling in the parking lot. We're not sitting in a
the waiting
large,
room.
very attractive and relaxed waiting room. Yet it's a big waiting room, right? Where you're being called by your therapist and walking down the hall. It's a completely different experience. And so we were really pleased, and then did start to pivot. Whole nother topic and a challenge in our field is that about 85 to 90% of therapists are women.
Yes.
And so we're lacking.
That's
We
another
are
thing.
absolutely
Yeah,
lacking.
absolutely.
Now, it's layered onto this conversation we're having about men. It's not a total surprise that a small percentage of guys will be attracted to that field, right? And
Right.
attracted to that work.
Well, because you've been shut down here for decades.
Yes.
So, I mean, to feel like you're vulnerable enough to go and listen to someone being vulnerable, like it's just a very
Absolutely.
complicated situation, and it's going to take a lot to sort of undo
Yeah.
what we've done, right?
And yet, here's the great news. I'm frustrated and both excited by this great news.
yeah.
The great news is that treatment really works. Both the outcome data shows us the treatment works. The nerdy, standardized outcome data shows us that it works. The human experience shows us that it works. Men that come in for treatment, boys, men, I don't care what we're talking about age-wise, they tend to do better in school. They have better relationships. This is how I can often convince them. They tend to do better in their jobs. So they tend to be more effective in their office environment. Office environments are incredibly social, right? We're social animals assuming you're at the office. We're social animals in the environment. The better you can navigate that, the higher up you will go within the system. And so I often...
That's an incentive.
Very much. And so when I have a guy that comes in for therapy because my wife sort of made me, or my partner, or my parents are like, I'm here, I don't really want to be here, my parents are making me, whatever that is, I will do my little spiel, I will do my little commercial and let them know that the outcome data is clear. If you do therapy as a man, your relationships will be stronger, your relationships will work out, your jobs will be more successful, you will be promoted more quickly, and outcomes will be better. That's often how I can sort of get them. Once they start to build a relationship and realize that there's power in that work, I don't need to convince them anymore. They typically become huge advocates, actually. And
Well, I think the biggest part, at least for me, when I go to see my therapist, I might be feeling sort of perplexed about something, and I'll share with her that's how I'm and just to get validation that my feelings are legitimate. You know, if you go your whole life and you're never validated,
absolutely,
think about what that can do to your head.
And we tend to actually, particularly in high socioeconomic, highly educated, highly demanding areas, we tend to not even be neutral about not understanding that. We tend to actually be negative about our own cognition, meaning not only do I not understand it, but this has to be that I'm just kind of overreacting, or I'm lazy, or I'm not really good at relationships, or I'm not great at my career. The negative messaging that if you're really honest, we tend to carry around tremendous negative messaging. If we can get someone to at least pause on that and at least be neutral and or positive. I do this little exercise in treatment where I will say, bring up a friend that's having a problem in your life. Okay? A level 5 problem. Not 10, the end of the world, and not 1, I don't know what to have for breakfast. A level 5. Think about what you would say to that friend. I support you. You can do this. I care about you. You got this. And you're saying that genuinely and authentically. Then I'll get someone to pause. Think about a problem you are having. Level 5. What do you say to yourself?
Come on.
I worked a little harder, right? Come on. I'm lazy. I don't understand this. Everyone else gets this and I don't. I'm screwing this up badly. Yeah. Exactly. And so the work is, how do we get you, by the way, authentic and real in terms of what you're saying to your friends? How can we get you to take that authentic realness and that connection and simply bring it over to you or close that gap?
Let me just say this. Enlightened friends will say,
okay,
you got this.
I appreciate your clarification.
I have your back.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. But somebody who is not enlightened will say things like, well, all you have to do is.
Yes, of
or
course.
Have you done, like. Of
course.
Like.
Yeah.
Let's really dig into that for a second.
You're right. And so my
Because
example
what is comforting?
You're absolutely.
Let's find the terminology that is comforting when you are with a friend who is going through a hard time. Again, another friend of mine, her grandmother passed away, and people are like, well, she had a good long life. She was 97. Well, everything happens for a reason. Now, if that is not the worst thing that you can say to somebody, come on, is there anything worse that you can say to somebody when they're going through a crisis?
That is so
Everything
true.
happens for a reason. Well, no kidding.
Yeah.
But comfort me and say, that must be really hard for you. I can understand how you could tell me more about your grandma. Tell me more about this situation.
And then be quiet, right?
Yes.
And then zip, 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Stick to that proportion. Life tends
I
to go
don't know
better.
what to say.
Right.
Tell me more.
Exactly. And here's the funny thing, and I get it. I really understand why this happens. The higher the degree of complexity of the problem, terminal illness, terrible divorce situation, someone that's had a death in their family in the last, say, 48 hours, death by suicide, the more complicated and more difficult the situation, i.e. they need us more, right? Those folks, we tend to back away, right? And so we can probably have conversations with folks that are having relationship difficulties and work issues, and maybe one of their kids is they're struggling with their kids. The more complex and, in all honesty, scary the situation is, we tend to back up. And
Because we don't know what to say.
We don't know what to say. And
We don't know. But I will say this, for those of you who are listening, even though I'm going to say what I'm saying, I'm giving you advice, but I'm telling you, do not give advice when somebody is in the middle of a crisis.
Fair.
It's like when somebody is unraveling and you go, oh, just calm down. Really? How does that help?
Right.
Does that really help?
You're right.
No, you
You're
just
right.
say, oh, how can I help?
You're so right. Absolutely.
And then shut up
Yeah.
and listen.
Right.
And they're going to probably say, I don't know. And then you know what your response is? I'm here for you.
You got it.
The end.
Absolutely, and it's as simple as that in many ways. But there's an emotional component to this. There's the language that you're using, and it's perfect. There's you, though, tolerating being uncomfortable. Right. So there's you. How do
that's
we?
so big.
How can we teach ourselves, and how do we teach each other as human beings to tolerate uncomfortable conversations? In some ways, it's the work of psychotherapy, right? At times, is how do we go in places in our own heads and in our relationships that are uncomfortable and tolerate getting what we like to say, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. The goal is not to be perfectly comfortable all the time. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But how can I tolerate the discomfort, and how can I sit with that? Maybe even learn from it, right? There's something to extrapolate from that and pull from it.
For sure. And I mean, I think if you're dealing with your children and you want to give a sense of being in control, I understand that completely. But if you're with your peer and you really don't know how to address the situation, authenticity is always best.
Absolutely.
I don't understand this either.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something. So when 9/11 happened, the very best sermon that I have ever been to, and I was, we were religious in our church attendance, and we went in on that Sunday, and the pastor just said, hold on to the hands next to you.
Wow.
And he said, just close your eyes. And he said, I can't explain this. And we sat for 40 minutes.
Really?
And nobody said a word. Because who could explain it?
Sure.
Right?
There was nothing to say.
There was nothing to say, but yet we were connected. We were physically connected, and we were connected through our feel. And there were people were really emoting, and that's really that's what we're designed to do.
Absolutely. We really are. We're social creatures that live together, right? We live together in our houses. We live together in our village. We live together in our county. It's 1 million people in Bergen County. We live together. That's not a coincidence. We're designed to be that way. Hard though. Hard when we feel alone in something that big. And so what you're describing, wow, that's quite an experience.
Yeah, and I think that you touched on that feeling alone. I think if we're really true to ourselves, we can be honest, and we can tell the people that we live with. I mean, how many times have you had a client come into your office and say, I just feel so lonely, but yet they live with a house, with a spouse and kids, and but they feel so lonely. So what is the answer to that?
Happens all the time, right? Happens to all of us at different times. And I think there's a bit of connecting to it. So I think as a therapist, we also experience our own loneliness at times. And so being honest about that and open about ourselves to ourselves helps us to kind of connect to that feeling. And so the trick typically to that is, and you touched on it earlier, is to be more vulnerable, right? Is to be more open with those around us. Because sometimes we have all of our stuff together. But when we have all our stuff together, there are these walls that go up, and they go up, and they're lovely brick walls, and they're well designed, and they look nice, and they're constructed beautifully.
Yes, but they're
and
really
level
hard to
one,
penetrate. Yes.
and they go level, beautiful brick. Remember, level, and all of a sudden you're alone. And so it's breaking down those walls and sort of saying to those persons, and it's a risk. It's that, how do we get comfortable being uncomfortable? How do I say to that person in my house, I'm really feeling lonely. I know I have lots of people around, I get this, but for some reason I'm feeling lonely. the very fact that you can talk about that you can admit that you can,
Oh,
huge.
that's being a
the walls
leader.
go pa-ching.
No, for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, leading by vulnerability, I think, is just one of the best things that you can do, right?
Absolutely. It was that principle that broke down during that conversation. I thought to myself, this is an exercise in leadership. This is an exercise in not only maleness and what that means, but also an exercise in leadership.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
So, one of your fellow Fordham graduates is very specific about this question. How did your 3 degrees, 1, 2, 3 degrees from Fordham,
And Columbia. Yeah, sorry.
and Columbia.
Yes.
All right. So Sean McCooey wants to know how your degrees from Fordham shaped your way of caring. And one of the other things that you mentioned to me is that even though you're the CEO, and I shouldn't even say even though, you are the CEO of West Bergen Mental Health, mental health care, you still see clients.
Oh, I do. Absolutely.
So tell us
Really
about how, the things that you learned, of course, specifically to Fordham, how that directs your treatment and,
Fair.
And
So-
why you decided to stay practicing.
This is a little bit of a family story. So Fordham is part of my family's thing. I'm child number 6.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh, my gosh.
I came along late in life. I'm sure I was planned. I came along very late in life. And so my father was a Fordham alum, and he actually graduated exactly 50 years before me, to the year before me at Fordham. And so my sister did her graduate work there. My brother did his undergrad. And so Fordham was sort of part of the
Kind of part of the whole family
it
conversation.
Really was.
Yeah.
It really was. It
Yeah.
was just kind of who we were and what we were about in many, many ways. And I loved Fordham. I did a double major there, and I loved it, loved every bit of it. Had a very, very good experience. It was an interesting time for me as a human being because I went.
Again, you're growing and learning.
Absolutely. We're figuring out who we are.
Yeah.
And so here we are. We're cruising along, right? I go to Catholic High School, St. Joe's, wonderful school. Again, third brother to go there, right? Sort of getting the picture
Legacy,
here.
yep.
Right? Yep. I end up going to Fordham. And during that time, I start to figure out that, I'm not really attracted to women. What is this about, right? What is this about? I mean, I really had figured that out in high school.
I was going to say, it took you a long
be
time by
honest.
the time you got in college, but by the time you
I
grew into yourself and you understood that you could
Absolutely.
call it out.
And so part of the kind of Jesuit kind of thinking is truth and authenticity, right? That powerful truthness, even when it's hard to hear. So sophomore year, I do a letter. Every one of my siblings, every one of my cousins, every one of my aunts and uncles, I mail 12 letters from the mailbox at Fordham University all in one day. It's a coming out letter. Boop. I popped the letter thinking, I don't want to have 14 conversations. That doesn't seem like an effective use of time.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, a letter felt a little safer to me, right? Felt a little more,
of
I could sort of control the message a little bit. I'm very lucky, and I'm very lucky that I had 100% acceptance. And
are
I
so
really am lucky
lucky.
because remember that I came along late in life. Remember that my dad graduated 50 years before me. That meant that for my age, I'm not supposed to have a World War II parents at my age.
Right.
My grandparents are supposed to be World War II folks.
Right.
So I was really 2 generations younger than my parents, and significantly younger than my siblings. My oldest sister drove my mother to the hospital when I was born.
Oh, wow.
So Fordham alum, by the way, did her MBA.
Yeah.
And a now retired banking executive who is at West Bergen volunteering at least once a week. That's
you
just
gotta
her
love
thing.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fordham, critical, important both for me personally, professionally, and I would say ethically in terms of
But I
how we come to
really
be.
love that, first of all, that you bring up your Jesuit education too. And then what a loving, supportive family. So I would imagine that all of those things are poured into the way that you are with your clients.
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. I am really grateful. I love the work that I do. I love going to work every day. The clients are amazing. The staff is beyond amazing. They do the work. I stay out of their way. I always say to the staff, I get you the resources you need and I stay out of your way.
Oh, that's
right.
great
That's
leadership.
right. This
Yeah,
is
because you trust them. Yeah.
Absolutely. They do their jobs better than I could without
Yeah.
any question. Clients are stronger than I could ever be. I sort of see clients, particularly those clients that suffer in our group homes, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, significant disorders. I always think, wow, they have way more courage than I could ever have. I don't know that I could do that. And I watch that and I see that. Love it.
It's
Love
really
it.
admirable.
As well as the clients I see in my practice. Love them. Love
And
them.
I like what you said earlier, I think before we started taping, but you said that you wanted to stay in practice so you could stay on top of what your employees are going through. And so you
Absolutely.
can kind of stay abreast as to what the best techniques are too.
Absolutely. Typically, in a large mental health center as large as we are, the CEO, and I do strategic direction, I do community relationships, I'm fiscal responsibility, I do the whole CEO leadership.
Yeah.
And the
You're out
higher
there.
up you go to the table of organization, the lower the number of clients you will see
Yeah.
typically. That didn't work for me. I was a little bit afraid I would forget how to do it. In terms of being a psychotherapist, I was afraid that I would not have that edge, and I was afraid that I would not be able to relate to the staff that are doing it every day.
Right.
And so I know what it's like to have a new client coming in and for you to both be exhilarated and a little uncertain and a little frightened about where it's going and being
Yeah.
unclear. And our field, one of the things that's just amazing about our field is it's so encouraged for you to pop into another therapist's office and say,
So you work
listen, I have this client and I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with this.
Right.
I think I may be in the wrong direction here. No matter what your level is, no matter what team you're on, and all West Bergeners work in teams. So the therapists work in a depression team or an anxiety disorders team or the autism team, ADHD team.
Right.
We all work in teams. But I will not stop at all as the CEO to stop into a therapist's office and sort of say, hey, I have this new client.
Yeah.
I'm a little unclear about where I'm going, and get some feedback.
Oh, I love this.
Our field is really designed to that. It's encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it would be unusual if you didn't do that.
Oh gosh, that is so good to know, because I love that other therapists are collaborating on the care of all of these patients. And by the way, that is a great recruiting tool for any of the men out there who are kind of maybe flailing and wondering what direction should I go in? Well, go into therapy. Because you
Absolutely.
can make a really profound difference in the world. Like seriously.
And there just aren't enough therapists overall.
Yeah.
Just period. They're just the demand in the United States far outweighs the ability of the system to meet it. And so it's pure math. There just aren't enough therapists. We were just keeping up pre-COVID.
Yes.
I don't know that we're really keeping up, but let's just say for the purpose of discussion,
We're
we were
treading
just
water,
keeping,
yeah.
correct. COVID happened, demand goes up, and the system just doesn't
Yeah.
work, right? It's just not enough. So at West Bergen, we're really proud of an initiative that we started a few years ago because we were frustrated with being frustrated about the lack of therapists and not enough treatment and not enough work going on. So we opened an institute. So we now have a training institute.
Oh,
so we
that's
have
fabulous.
12 graduate level therapists that are training from all kinds of different
Love it.
schools. They're living it. They're working it. They're a part of who
And
we
they're
are.
collaborating with your
Absolutely. They're learning from those experts, right? They're learning. It's the mentor-mentee model. They're really learning from it. And I'm really proud of that. A little bit, in all honesty, well, sometimes in leadership, you get tired of complaining about a problem and you have to turn the mirror around and say, what are you doing about this? What's your role in this?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because there is something called compassion fatigue. And how prevalent is that amongst caregivers?
Yeah, it's significant, and it requires active and intentional work to deal with that. And so most therapists have their own therapists. They have, again, every therapist works in a team, and the teams meet regularly. So there's a lot of mutual support. In fact, that was one of the things that really happened during COVID that didn't surprise us a little bit, but I worried about it. The outpatient therapists go home. They do all their work via teletherapy. And we realized how important that popping into the office was, that 5 minutes, 4 minutes.
And just seeing somebody just to even just have the
Absolutely.
facial like,
Right. The
This is a
work that
tough
we
day.
do is hard.
Yeah.
And so I can picture, because I started as a therapist at West Bergen, I know what it's like to be standing in front of the microwave waiting for my dinner to heat up while you're talking to another therapist about the client that you just saw or the suicidal client that you're worried about that's coming in at 7:15. I know what that's like. And so we worked really hard to get folks back in as quickly as we could, not because it was we want you back. That's
Right.
not, it was more about
No,
mutual
it's
support.
connection and
It was,
support,
and we realized that it's an incredibly supportive environment, but it's an informally incredibly supportive environment. It's that 5 minute, hey, I see your door open. How you doing, Jeannie? Can I
well,
ask
again,
you about
just
something?
validating each other too, and just saying this is really tough.
You got it. You got it.
You just said something. You said about a suicidal client. Can you help me clarify for our listeners? You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, they committed suicide," and I personally prefer, because I have someone that I love dearly that died by suicide, and I prefer the terminology died by suicide. So can you I'm sure you can more eloquently than I, explain to our listeners why that terminology is better?
Oh, very much, very much. Yes, the suicide community, and it's a community. You are part of that community, right? Your family is part of that, or a friend is part of that community. It is very much a community. And over the last several years, we've gotten away from the word committed. Some of that is because we get away from that association with they committed a crime, right? They did something wrong. And so we do now use the language died by suicide. We also don't love the language attempted, successful. A suicide attempt in the United States, 1.2 million suicide attempts in a year. It's 100,000 suicide attempts in a month. That's a number that should alarm us from a public health point of view. So we're very active in terms of West Bergen's role in the suicide community. We do a tremendous amount of presentations around it. We do suicide clearances for different schools, somewhere around 250 to 300 in a year. Now remember, there's 180 school days in a year, so we're doing them every single day.
Wow.
And so those are tough assessments. Those are tough on the clinicians, tough on the organization, tough on the school, but they're critical and they're important.
Oh, definitely.
We also very quietly, arguably too quietly, respond to families who have had death by suicide. And so those of us that are well trained in it tend to respond to families who have had a death by suicide. I myself has sat at a kitchen table 2 hours after notification of death with a family where we had to think through, how are we going to tell the kids, what's our plan, what's the plan for the community, what's the plan for the funeral, what's the plan for, and kind of walk them through it. We literally think of it in three levels: the family, the community, and really us, right? Each other as human beings.
It's such a grim topic, but I also think it's a very important topic. I'm involved with another, I love my little book group. Barbara Hand is part of my book group at it's at Westside Presbyterian. And we meet with Mark Oler every Tuesday morning at 7:30. We have a book group. So we're talking about suicide. And some of the people were, what could I have done? I don't understand. If I would have just been able to say this, or if they would have just done that. And I just have to say, and again, please chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, please don't shame people that die by suicide. We would never think about shaming someone who died of cancer or heart disease.
Absolutely.
And to also recognize that depression is a very, very painful disease, and there is a physical component of pain. It's not just what's going on in your brain, right?
Very much.
And so when it's like cancer. You have an episode, and then you get some treatment, and you go into remission.
You got it.
And then the cancer may come back,
Absolutely.
and the depression can come back.
Absolutely.
And when it comes back with a vengeance. And so while these people who are suffering, they know that treatment can help. But that pain, I'm assuming, help me out.
No, you're quite correct, Jeannie. So two things come to my mind immediately. And one is, and I always say this when I do trainings on suicide, if you hear nothing else from this training, hear this. If you are concerned about someone, you are concerned that they might be dangerous, they might be thinking about hurting themselves, please ask them. Please talk to them. There's a stigma, there's a fear that if I ask you, I'm going to plant the seed, right? The statistics and the outcome data shows us it is literally the opposite. So for you to be able to, again, we're swinging back to let's be a little uncomfortable during this conversation. I'm going to say to you, have you been thinking about hurting yourself? What's that been like for you? Is that part of kind of what's going on here? The very fact that you were able to ask that statistically will lower the likelihood of that person's death by suicide markedly.
They feel seen.
Huge, exactly.
Do
not hesitate to ask.
Yeah,
do not walk away.
I also feel like we need to lead caution that there isn't anything that we can say or do that can prevent it. right?
Without question, there is a certain percentage of folks that are going to, and we don't like to talk about this in our field. There are a certain number of folks that are not going to make it, right? That are oncologists talk about this, cardiologists talk about this,
of course.
all the other areas talk about this. We have a hard time sort of admitting to ourselves as therapists that there are certain folks that are just not going to make it.
Right.
Your point is well made. I think there's also stigma around the family, and so I just want to comment there for a second.
Please.
I can think about a family that I responded to in the local area. Dad had died by suicide in the morning. I had spent the entire day. We had told the kids. We did all planned it, funeral, the whole 9 yards. I arrive at the house the next day, and I thought to myself, it's too quiet in this house. There's no food. All right, I'm half Italian, so I think that's the way to cope. But,
Well, that's usually what happens, yeah.
Right, there's the rituals that we do when someone dies, right? You show up with food. You show up with a casserole. You just fill the house with people. It was eerily quiet. So now I'm in the front driveway, and I'm throwing baskets with he was then 10. It was one of the sons. Now, he figured out pretty quickly I don't know how to throw baskets, so it was a great opportunity for him to teach me. It was a wonderful. Down the street comes two women, and they're walking, and it's a small side street. And they pause. They clearly know him. They clearly know that Dad had passed away. They give their condolences. I then go over to them and I say, I'm Michael. I'm from West Bergen. We respond to these kind of things, and we're here. And the one says, "Can I talk to you a minute?" Over I go, and I talk to these two ladies, and they say that they had just had a kitchen table meeting with 6 or 7 of their neighbors, and they weren't sure how to respond. They weren't sure whether they should ring the doorbell, not ring the doorbell, bring flowers, not bring flowers, bring food. So I said to them, what would you do if this dad had died in a car crash yesterday or died unexpectedly of a heart attack? And they said, oh, easy. We would bring food. We would fill the house with noise. I said, pretend for the purposes of this discussion that he died in another way. They turn around, up they go, down the street, and within an hour, there are cars starting to pull up. The house fills with food. There's ritual. And this is all part of how we kind of deal. But it was fear, right? It was the stigma, afraid. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know how to go there. So they just needed a little bit of education. That's why we're doing this talk. And they just needed a little bit of, a little nudge maybe.
Yeah. I am so glad that you came in to talk to us today. Thank you so much. You've given me so much to ponder, and I hope that you've given our listeners a lot to ponder as well. I can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you so much for coming in.
Jeannie, thank you so much. These are important conversations, and I appreciate you inviting us in and encouraging uncomfortable conversations. I really do. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much. All right, you guys, that's it for today. So I just want to give a big thank you to Michael from West Bergen Mental Health Care. We're so, so grateful for the important work that you do. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. As always, you can follow Ridgewood Talks on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on all the major platforms, with full video episodes available on YouTube and Spotify. And this episode was produced by the fabulous Gil Edwards at Ignite Creator Studios right here in Ridgewood. And for your information, Ignite Creator Studios offers video podcasting and content strategy for businesses and services. So please, give this platform a try and use the incredible resources here at Ignite Creator Studios. Once again, I am Jeannie Johnson for Ridgewood Talks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.